You are listening to the number one real estate podcast in the world, where we talk with real estate professionals about their wins, losses, lessons, and stories, help you win in your local market today. My name's Cody from Sheridan Street. I usually have a co-host, but I don't have a co-host today. He's traveling to Medellin, and I'm going up to meet him next week. And we are going to, do what we did over the last 6 months, travel through Latin America again for a little while. And today I have a extremely special guest. Really excited about this conversation. When this popped up onto my calendar, I was super excited because I know we share the same type of ethos around brand, around education, around contribution, and really excited to introduce to you to the podcast, Justin. Justin, my man, thank you for joining us today. Like, why don't you give us a high-level overview on kind of like who you are, where you sell real estate, how you kind of got to where you are today, kind of give us like the Spark Notes version of what you do.
Yeah, happy to do that. So my name is Justin Konikow, located Southwestern Ontario, Canada. So London being the heartbeat of our market, but we cover all of Southwestern Ontario. In terms of what I'm doing today, I currently own Prime Real Estate, which is a brokerage that I own with my wife, but it's not really a brokerage like most people think a brokerage is. We don't recruit. We have a waiting list of about 40 people. We only do hirings maybe once or twice a year max. What we are is we're a company that specializes in real estate branding, marketing, and sales, right? So think of it as a professional corporation that's ran by Shannon and myself. Underneath us, we have our transaction coordination arm and our marketing communications arm, and then our sales team. And our sales team is different from your typical real estate sales team, where normally you have a rainmaker, which would be Justin, that brings in a boatload of leads that I can't handle. I just hand them off, and then I'm disconnected from the files. We run more like a Navy SEAL team, right? Where there is decentralized command. I have the best commercial guys. I have the best new development guys. We do every aspect of real estate, also very unique for a brokerage. And we collaborate, execute, and then collaborate again, right? So it's very much modeled after the Navy SEALs, where they go in, they don't come up with overcomplicated SOPs. They have a mission, they execute it, they debrief together. We, work on our equipment together, we tweak things, and we go back out there and execute again. Very much built on the principle of do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself. That has been our founding principle from day one. Very difficult to do in the real estate industry where there's money involved, both from a client perspective, right, where sometimes agents get commission breath and just want to execute on the deal. But I would even say more from an internal culture perspective, where when we see signals of people worrying about what other people are making or counting other people's money or that scarcity mindset, they quickly find themselves outside of our organization, because we're very aligned in terms of the mission of providing more value than we take. My background, grew up in Montreal. I was into everything you can imagine. I was like the eternal hobbyist, man of a million different hobbies, from playing music and interests and so on and so forth. As I was growing up in Montreal, big city, beautiful city, lots of great food, arts, and culture. It, to me, was somewhere where I was almost getting too distracted, right? I got lots of energy, and it's one of those things where I needed to get focused and away from the party city of Montreal. So I went to little old London, Ontario, Canada in the early 2000s. Followed my sister, who was taking kinesiology here. A lot of people know London as a university town because of Western. Funny thing is, when I moved here, first thing I did, because I always did, was found a job. I always worked. I've worked in mechanic shops, landscaping companies. I've done everything at the grocery store you can imagine. And I found myself at a bar called Jim Bob Ray's as a bouncer. And that was the only job I could get when I moved to London. And I was 150 pounds, soaking wet. Jim Bob's is known as a place that was rowdy back in the day, and I had to learn to talk really, really quickly. You're smiling. Do you know Jim Bob's?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard of it. Like, I'm right down the road. So I've definitely heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked there for years, and I actually did every job in that company, always ambitious and worker by nature. I wasn't happy just doing what I was doing. I actually went to school for marketing. I took digital imaging and animation. I thought I was going to be a game designer for some time, but I can't sit down in front of a computer for 14 hours at a time. Just not my personality. I like people. And the cool thing about working there was I met my first mentor, Mike Smith. Servant leadership mindset. I met him sweeping up cigarette butts in the parking lot, treated people so well. And I had no idea that this guy was worth millions at the time. Like, he's just such a good guy. So when I did learn that after the fact, somebody's like, hey, do you know who that was? And they explained to me like his background. I realized that you could be a leader in your industry without having the monikers of success, like the watch and the car, and have to treat people bad like I've seen in other companies. So Mike mentored me. did every job in his company. I was a bouncer, I was a bar back, I was a bartender, I was a DJ. And then I got to running the bar backs initially, then managed the whole companies, and then do marketing and communications for Mike, which was always my passion, right? He would give me restaurants and say, hey, we need to rebrand this, we need to reposition this. And I would work with the general managers at those restaurants and just try things. Like Pizza Pie, for example, was struggling. Like the food was amazing, but people just didn't know about it. So London has a train that runs right through downtown. Yeah. I timed it. I'm like, hey, 5 o'clock, the train comes. Let's have 15 pizzas ready at like 4:45, cut them into tiny little slices on plates, $5 off coupons. And I was running up and down in traffic, handing out free pizza because
insane.
Like if people like it, they like it, right? Anyway, we packed the restaurant, did that with that, rebranded Jim Bob's with the team there, brought in some great production people. And then I met my wife. And, when I was going through my mission, I was always trying to kind of climb the ladder and work myself into a longer term career. But I liked Mike because he just let me try things. Like I felt like I owned the company. When I met Shannon, my wife, she came from an incredible background. So small business, their family's in automotive. Shannon ran a consulting company in Yorkville. She had a background at Ivy. She got her MBA from the Ivy Richard School of Business, which is no joke. And she kept kind of pushing me of saying like, listen, there's more there. Like, you're not built to work for somebody else. Mike's been great to you and everything else too, but let's do something together. And she mentioned real estate. And my exact response to her was, I don't want to be a greaseball on a golf course. They don't work hard, like your typical stuff. Cause I had the same perception of agents anybody else did. She said, if you can take the same work ethic you take in the restaurant industry, I can handle the business side. We could crush it. Like we won't be a brokerage. We'll be a company that does real estate is really what our mission still is, right? Is people to look at Prime as a company that does real estate, not just Justin who happens to work there or Jamie that happens to work there or Tyson. So initially, like every other agent, got licensed, went to a big box brand, worked there for 2 years because you have to get your broker's license. And then we opened Prime. That was late 2014, I believe, or early 2015. And initially was me, Shannon, a VA, and me sitting in a 300 square foot office by myself, building the company. And then we started bolting on the different attributes. And now we have the real estate brokerage and we have the production company, which creates the assets for the brokerage, if that makes sense.
There's a lot there. We're going to unpack a lot of it because I think that I love the fact that, as I was listening to kind of your backstory and like, as I've been following your journey, there's a clear mindset that you have that it all makes sense. Like now, like, especially even in your educational content around contribution, specifically around like really seeing yourself like a business. Like how do you think real estate agents that are entering this market today or entering, like maybe they've been in the business for 5 years, like I chat with hundreds of agents, hundreds of teams, from 100 team leads that from across the country that have a different mindset around business where it's like they don't necessarily see themselves like a business. Like where did that shift happen for you and your wife around the shift where it's like, this is going to be a business. Like this is like, we're going to step into this. There's no plan. It didn't sound like there was a plan B. It was like, this is a business. We're going to operate. We're going to be doing this long-term. Where did that mindset come? Was that like more from your wife, or was it more from you? Like did you guys operate in the beginning of starting the business?
So it was 2013, after being in the business for a year. Like we looked at the methodologies of how people were acquiring clients. Actually, probably started in 2012 now that I think about it, because we got the typical training booklet and scripts of contact everybody on Facebook, tell them you're in real estate. And, if they're looking to buy or sell, or if they know anybody to buy and sell. That didn't work for me because my friends gave me a hard time. I messaged 3 people and they're like, okay, Justin, like, why are you talking to me like this? Right? Like we're friends. And some of them were like, well, you're brand new. Like you got to earn it before I give it to you. And it was a lesson for me to realize that, okay, we need a tactile approach. So then I went back to my core business principles, which was when Mike said, hey, get Pizza Pie up and running. How are you going to do that? Well, I deconstructed and reverse engineered what I wanted to accomplish. And I think when we realized we didn't want to do it the normal way, that's where Shannon and I both had a conversation around, like, what is Prime going to be? Or at the time, like, what is our real estate business going to be? And early on, it was very simple. It was, we want to be like almost 100% referral based. I'm not super interested in bus signs. I'm not super interested in convincing people that don't know me that, I have to discount my commission to get their business. Like I want the phone calls where Cody calls me And he had a meeting with somebody. He's like, yeah, they said you're the guy. And I just call you and I'm your guy just by association and out of trust. Like that's the business we wanted. So the initial run was heavily around content and education, right? I didn't have a ton of business. So I shot short form content before short form content was cool to educate people on things that they need to know about the contracts. And it's funny because the vanity metrics weren't there. I barely had followers. Like I didn't really build my social presence till about a year and a half to 2 years ago when Clubhouse popped, but I had been building up the skill set for the 7 years before that. And then when we made the switch to Prime, I still remember actually that day, we were treating it like a business, and every year we'd review. We'd look at our P&L, what was our profit and loss, what were our expenses. Here's a tip for your viewers. Write down all of your clients that you did deals with and start ranking them 1 to 10. 7's not an option. So at most, they're going to be a 6 or an 8, right, on either end of the spectrum. And then you get really clear on like, oh, I just want to work with my 8 to 10s. What types of files were those? A lot of them were commercial deals. Like a lot of people don't know my background was commercial. That's where I started at Royal LePage Commercial. So I was like, okay, I really like doing, maybe smaller tenant representations to start because some of those turned into the biggest mandates I ever did. But I also know Grand Bend really well, and I love luxury properties and new development. So I really started codifying a plan around what tranches of business we were looking at. And then when 2014 came around and we started talking about opening up our own brokerage, that's where it really codified the conversation. We were going from, well, we've been real estate agents, we have a team. We almost looked like something from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent if you looked at that blueprint. And we almost signed a lease for a 4,000 square foot office with which we would have been a recruiting firm because I would need to fill that office. I would have literally had to hire probably 60 agents, and the path of Prime would have been that of every other brokerage Yeah. And I remember we canceled that deal. It was with a really good friend of mine. And I called him. It was like, I think Christmas. And I was like, hey, dude, it's just not right for us. We're not going down that path. Good luck with the building, everything else as well. And we kept our North Star to the fact that, are we a company that is the most trusted name in real estate that has the best systems? And for the people watching, the last thing I'll say is we're always in that journey where the last 6 months, we've stripped everything down. And now we're looking at, are we the best at transaction management and marketing and communication? And we're rebuilding the foundation for the next iteration of Prime, because that's where we're at.
My mentor, Sharon, always says, clarity is the mother of mastery. And I really believe that. It sounds like early on, you and Shannon had massive clarity on where you were going. Like, how does one find the clarity that they need in order to even potentially build the vision? Or like, how do they find that? And how did you find that early on in your career? Like, what types of conversations were you and Shannon having around actually building this large organization? Like, was it happenstance? Were there questions you were asking each other? Like, how did you operate in the beginning to even like put this into like thought?
Well, I'm smiling and laughing because I'm like, we battled it out, right? Like she's so much the analytics numbers person. I'm so much the creative arts person. But if you read Rocket Fuel, we both be visionaries, truthfully. We have great integrators below us, but we're very different in terms of how we operate. So don't be afraid to get into the weeds with the people that you're partnered with, your mentors, your partners, and have difficult conversations. Because some things that I thought held true, I fought her on and then lost, and then realized now was the perfect thing. But if I didn't have her and I wasn't willing to put my ego aside and say, well, let's try this, then we would never discover the best versions of ourselves. And vice versa is true as well. Like she gives me the leeway to try things and implement new tactics where, here's an example. My mentor is Ryan Serhant. Met him in 2018 before the courses existed. I went to meet him via a meeting with like a friend that sent me there. And I cold emailed him in the cab after. And I was like, dude, that was the best meeting ever. I will pay you X amount of dollars for that meeting once a year. You don't have to call me. I won't bug you. Won't pull up your phone because I know how busy he is. And his response was, I appreciate that. Come to Soho whenever you want. I don't do that. This was back in 2018, right? Before they built the courses. From then on, started building relationship with him and giving my SOPs to his team. Long story short, we ended up building a relationship, and now I'm definitely part of his organization and that whole side of things. But the same thing you did with Sharon, you asked the question, how do you get clarity? My meetings with Ryan are very much, hey man, okay, so I said I wanted to do this last year. I did this. didn't work out like I thought. This was really good. I hated this part of it, so I fired that client. This is what I want to do next year. What do you think? And having people in your life like my wife and Ryan and other mentors I have that will be honest with me and don't want anything from me, right? Or just being honest about, here's my perspective, is how you get clarity. Because they tell you something doesn't mean that it defines you, right? So having different people helping you codify your ideas is the best part. Ryan and I run very different businesses. I don't want his celebrity. It is probably a lot for him to deal with, right? I like my anonymity. Yeah, and what I'm building is very different. I know what he's building, and it's insane. It's really cool. But I think it's just by getting really good, here's the answer, practitioners around you that you trust. That is the number one way to get clarity, and then lean on them. You don't have to be an island unto yourself.
I love that advice, like the practitioners. And it's so interesting that you just made the ask, like you drafted the email, you made the ask to somebody who was like, at that point in 2018, like, he wasn't doing the courses, like where it's like you kind of found him prior to like him really creating all the courses and doing all the mentorship. So that's really cool that, you made the ask, you reached out and you were able to kind of form the relationship. And it's like that consistently keeps coming up throughout the podcast that we do, where it's like, oftentimes I think a lot of people are just afraid to make the ask. They know that who the top performing agent or the top performing team is in their city that they could provide value to and that they could reach out to. They just like don't make the ask, which is like, it sounds like that was like the first step that you took. Now I want to dive into like the team, like your brokerage structure, because like, sure, like you had said, what you're doing is very different than like the traditional brokerage. So I'm really curious to know kind of like we chatted a little bit about the vision about like battle testing and, really getting around people that can help you find the clarity you need and implementing it. Like, how does the team operate on like a day-to-day, like how, like if you're not like a team, like it sounds sort of like you and Shannon both like run the brokerage and you have people underneath of you. Like what does the organization structure for the company look like?
Well, so like to have that conversation, I need to separate Prime and Justin Konikow as two independent people, right? Because Prime, the company, operates independently of Justin Konikow. I could leave tomorrow and the company would operate just fine without me. And that's really my wife, right? Like she runs all the HR, all the TC. I do most of the marketing communications, mainly from a branding perspective, because I guess if you thought of Prime, you'd think of me from a thought leadership perspective that drives a lot of the attention to the brokerage. But to be frank with you, we're at the point now where I could easily slot in a lot of other people within the brokerage as thought leaders. And we've tried to do that over the last 7 years. A lot of the agents that we have here, one of the biggest things that we try and do for them is build up their confidence and their names in the community by sharing hundreds of times throughout the year on my own social feeds to my audience that is very trusted, who these people are, what they're experts with, and just beat it into their head. So from Prime's perspective, it really does operate independent of Justin. I'll make leadership decisions with my wife. We're reviewing our P&L every single month, going over our numbers and making adjustments for, here's an example. What do you do when the market shifts and digital advertising doesn't work anymore because nobody wants to buy anything? They care more about market intelligence. We start cutting back Facebook ads, redeploying those funds to our monthly market updates, client events, Sphere, right? Like those are decisions I'll make from a brokerage perspective, like where we're deploying resources and how we're building things. Also, I really enjoy being part of the education training and that side of things. So like, what does our onboarding plan look like for agents? How are we supporting them when they need something dealt with at 11 o'clock on a Saturday? Like we are very much there for them that way. And if you take Justin as an agent that works at Prime, I have a ton of business that I share with my team. We gave out over $1 million in GCI to our team on deals that they just literally handed on a silver platter to them last year alone. We're looking to double that this year. And the way that operates is very much, they have to show me their willingness to read the service delivery standards so that they know the expectations for the buyers and sellers and everything that's expected of them. They need to be super educated on the product or the asset class that we're bringing. And then the biggest thing is making sure that we're very clear to have cohesive communication with our clients. Because the biggest thing that happens in our industry is Cody wants to buy a house in London, calls Justin, Justin's too busy, sends you to Peter. You never hear from Justin again. You feel like you just got handed off. The big thing for me that we worked on last year was systemizing our workflow. We use Follow Boss. So our workflow is very simple. Everything lives in Follow Boss. I don't even want to be CC'd on an email because before I call Mark, I'm going to check up on the file on Follow Boss, make sure I'm up to speed. So if Cody calls me, all of a sudden I know everything that's happening on the file. Cody feels valued, right? So I think we also understand our agents want anonymity and they want the ability to be autonomous and not feel like I'm holding their hand every step of the way. And it's always a back and forth of making sure we have that cohesive communication. And it's always a work in progress, right? It's not something that we're 10 out of 10 at. It's something that we want to be a 10 out of 10 at.
With you not running the traditional team model, generally the traditional team model that we've seen is, the team joins, somebody joins the team, they get leads given to them by the team lead. And it kind of sounds like you're doing that, like from like more of a brand perspective. I'm curious to know, because it sounds like you have an exclusive approach. You said you have 40 people waiting to join the brokerage. What are some things that you look for as like a broker owner, as a team lead in a highly, in somebody that would fit into your culture? And like, what are some of the things that, are tangibles? Like if somebody's out there and they're a team lead, so let's speak team leads first. What are some things that they should be looking for in what could be a high producing agent?
There's 3 attributes that I always look for in all candidates to be energy, integrity, and intelligence. I truly think I could find somebody at Future Shop that is amazing at selling cameras at Future Shop and take them into this business and train them to be a top tier, top 5% agent within a year to 2 years pretty easily. Because I think the ability to be reliable is so important, but the ability to have integrity in a business that a lot of people are just chasing a dollar is a big thing. But the other thing I look for is I look for how they treat other people. So most of the people that found themselves here via a phone call from somebody that I trust that says, hey, I just talked to this person. They're getting their license. I know you're not hiring, but would you talk to them? Right. And the second test that we have is, do I have the capacity to serve that person? Like I've said no to people that I genuinely wish I could have said yes to, but maybe we had just let go of some admin or things had changed on the back end. And I was completely committed to knowing the next 60 or 90 days, I need to move this rock. I appreciate you, but I don't have the attention. If you have to go somewhere else, I understand that. If you don't, I'll let you know when we're doing our next round of hiring. I think team leaders need to be okay saying no when the timing's wrong. And then also use the circle of people around you to test for that integrity piece, right? Ryan taught me that because people walk in my office back in the day. Victor was a good example of that. So I sold high-end bikes with Louis Garneau, guy would write competitively on the pro circuit. He was just in Italy with Team Canada. And he told me what he wanted to do. I'm like, you're my type of people. Sure, you're hired. 30-second interview, right? That's bit me in the butt before because I think I can help everybody. And Ryan said he does the first interview. And then I believe it's his assistant that does the second. And then it's a team member that does the third. So we have something similar here now too, where I'll do the initial phone interview, a sit down interview. My wife will do the next one. And then I'll have them typically meet with 2 or 3 team members and then ask for feedback from those team members. And I think that's building a system is great because if you don't have a system, your system is just not having a system.
Yeah, no. And that's genius advice to especially if they're the ones that your team is the ones that are going to be consistently working with this person. They fit into the culture. That's super smart. Now, when it comes to the team structure, and you said you have 40 people waiting on deck. What makes there's a lot of people that want opportunities, especially the big thing right now we hear from so many agents from across the country is hey, as a single agent right now, I'm struggling, so I want to join a team. Which I think, in my personal opinion, I think that's a great idea. If you're struggling, you should join a team, somebody that can help you, guide you in the right direction rather than leaving the industry. Which is happening a lot. You and I both know tons of agents are leaving the industry like crazy. What do you think as a single agent are some of the intangibles and some of the things that agents should be doing right now in order to build their brand locally, and drive deals for themselves? I know that there's an element of you where you say, I can own, like, we're not at a point, like, we've built a business and we're now at a point where, like, we can turn away business. Like, we don't have to work with everyone, but not everyone has that luxury in the beginning, especially in the beginning. Like, and you probably didn't have the luxury at the beginning to turn that away. Like, how can people that might be struggling right now in a shifting market, like you said, Facebook ads aren't, like, a lot of Facebook ads aren't necessarily working as well as they used to. You know, there's, like, they might still be working, but they're not working as well as they used to. Like, what are some things that agents should be doing right now in order to drive income into their business?
I mean, that's to me a very simple answer. I think it just gets very convoluted because of all the different seminars and things that are available online. People get paralysis by analysis because I need to get viral on TikTok. I got to start a YouTube channel, do neighborhood tours. I need to do this. I need to do that. I got to do mailers now. Like, I mean, that's the biggest problem with our industry, right? All of those things work. Facebook ads work if you know how to convert them. And we spent 4 months figuring out the new way to have those conversations, and we crush Facebook leads. They work super well for us now, but we have to go through a learning period of buyer sentiments changed. What's the new conversations, and do that right now. What I find super interesting is in this season, I've done this messaging for like 3 months now. I've got my shovel in my hand. I'm doing open houses. I'm doing buyer tours. I'm doing listing appointments. Why? Because I want to be able to come back to the team and take out my shotgun and take it apart and be like, all right, this is what worked. This is what didn't work. And actually hear and see what the buyers and sellers are actually doing. So A, get around somebody that's doing that so you can shadow them. If you're brand new, find somebody that's doing what you want to do and align yourself with that person. Going back to the Syrian conversation, dude, it took like 5 years for me to even probably remember my name. Right? Like the initial email was, yeah, okay, but whatever. It went back and forth. I actually reached out to Jenna West, his head of new development. And I remember her asking about something about like my SOPs and my action plan. I literally went into Follow Boss, copied and pasted it, sent it to her in an email. And then I was working with Social Joe and some other stuff, and then Krista. And then like 8 months after that, I reached back out to Ryan, and he probably still didn't remember who I was. And then a year later, I gave them something else, or like he launched something. So I bought a bunch of his books and gave them out to my team. And we went through that whole process, and we started really just building a relationship where I wasn't just there for the photo op. So if you're a new agent looking to align yourself with an agent that's doing what you're wanting to do, understand that his time is very, very valuable, or her time is very, very valuable. And you need to come at that relationship from a contribution perspective, not a parasite perspective, right?
Yeah.
You just want to learn, and then you're going to bounce from them in a year because that's going to burn that relationship, and it's going to have a far further negative effect than anything else. But let's pretend that's not an option. If I was a brand new agent and I was in a brand new city that I didn't know anybody in, it was all by myself, very first thing I would do is I would start my social media accounts. Obviously, I have my license at this point. First account I'd probably focus on is Instagram. And I'd be searching my location with hashtags, and I'd be building a community of people that were business owners, active on Instagram. More specifically, I'd be going to other real estate agents' pages and looking at who's commenting. And the people that are commenting the most, I'm going to start clicking on their profiles and see who they are, and start showing up at their coffee shops and their places and just learning about my community. And as I'm meeting these people, I'm not mentioning I'm in real estate. I'm not saying anything to them at all. I'm getting involved in the community. In tandem with that, I am using a CRM, and I'm building a database of people that I want to know. But I would be 100% committed to the process that nobody's going to know who I am for at least a year or 2 or 3 years. But if I show up consistently and I build a database, there's going to be value to that. From the business side, because it's going to make money, I would be calling every agent in my office, and I'd be saying, hey, I'll take anything you don't want to do. I'll sit your open houses, realtor.ca leads, anything that you think is junk, give it to me. I'll give you 50-50 on everything that I close, which most people just want to pay a referral. I'd say 50-50. I may call you for a question here or there. Cool. Most agents are going to be like, for sure, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Now you're building up your database. You're building up your database. And the 3 things you need to do and put in your calendar, and for most people, I'll say, only do it Monday to Thursday. I'm giving you Friday off so you can take a 3-day weekend. Wake up and work your database, minimum 30 minutes a day, and have a workflow. I have a folder on my Chrome, which is 11 tabs in Follow Boss. I right click and I hit open, and I get all 11 tabs open. I look at my daily goals. I look at my inbox. I look at my tasks. I look at my overdue tasks, goes into all of our overdue tasks. And then I look at my smart list. Once I'm done, I'm done. And I don't have to think about the workflow and the process. So prospect every day And I would say most agents are going to fail in the next year because they are not actually prospecting. They're doing everything but picking up the phone because they don't know what to say. I've done episodes on what to say, and trust me, there's a lot of info out there. And I do that, and then build your business, work on your business every day, and then get out and be seen. I think you're huge on the content platforms. I just watched your video about getting testimonials, phenomenal tip. And, I think putting yourself out there in the wild at least 3 times a day on Instagram stories is going to start showing your network that you're out there doing things, learning things, and involved. And you can do it all on Instagram. Build your CRM, shoot your content, and get out there and actually find the business. But I do think prospecting is the one thing that's overlooked by most people.
Genius tips, especially around like just being present in your community. I think that one of the mistakes that a lot of agents that I see make is like they don't know anyone in their city, or they don't know the right people that can connect them with the right people. Like my business partner old business partner who moved on would always say to me, he's like, the biggest thing that you can do as an entrepreneur when you're first starting out is just network your ass off. Like just meet with absolutely everyone. Don't ask for anything. Just simply connect with as many possible people as you can. And that can literally make a difference, especially in a small town like London or Peterborough. That's really what I did in the early days of entrepreneurship, was I just connected with everyone I could possibly connect with. Now, something I want to add, because I think it's so genius what you were saying with Ryan Serhant. And because a lot of people ask, how have I been able to connect with people like Sharon? How have I been able to connect with people?
I know Sharon, absolutely. Glenda's a good friend. I know
Glenda's a good friend. Yeah, like, we're all connected. And a lot of it comes down to like, I asked Sharon this question the other day. I'm like, it's like, you don't need to, you never needed to connect with me. Like you just, like, we were in a mastermind together, and he's like, every piece of advice that I gave you and every tip that I gave you, you went and implemented it. So a lot of these mentors, what they're looking for is like, if they give you advice, like, are you actually going to come back and be like, hey, I did this and this is how it worked? Because they, just like we get a sense of contribution from helping other people, they get the sense of contribution in their world. It's like, if you actually went and did the things that you said they're going to do, it's like, don't just take information and just be like, oh, that's cool, like I'll implement that a year down the road. It's like, actually implement the thing so that you can then continue. And you probably did the same thing with Ryan. It's like, Ryan told you to do this. It's like, you went and you did it. You're like, hey, Ryan, I did this. It's like, what's the next thing I have to do? And like, it's really cool. Now, I really want to unpack, and I want to finish up the podcast unpacking your social media strategy, because what you're doing, like, you've been doing this a lot longer than, even some of the direct response. Like you said, like in 2015, 2016, I was creating content. Like a lot of the direct response marketing people that were really focused on email are now kind of like coming out into brand. Like you look at the guys like, even like Alex Hormozi. And if you don't know who he is, like anyone listening to this podcast, look him up. He's a freaking genius when it comes from a marketing perspective. But he's jumped on the brand train where it's like, your brand is your invisible hand. Fame is the most efficient business model. And Ryan Serhant is a perfect example of that person. Fame is the most efficient business model. Or our friend Glenda Baker is another great example of that. Like, when you're thinking about content today in today's market, it's one thing for us to say provide valuable content or provide education. Like, what does that actually mean? And like, what are some like tactical things that agents or team leads should be considering in a 2023 environment in order to build their brand?
I think first thing I'd say is don't try and be Alex Hormozi or Glenda Baker. Like, how sick are you of seeing the exact same clip factories? They exist everywhere. Marketing companies, I'm getting 10 a day. They're like, hey, do you want to shoot short form content? They're going to pay some VA, $4 an hour to chop out content and shoot these videos that are all ubiquitous. I think the answer, honestly, to be frank with you, is find your own personal identity within the sea that you exist in. The very first thing that I learned from Ryan and his team was you're more than just an agent. Like, what makes you uniquely you? I didn't know your background, where you are now, where you're from previously, where you're located. Like, the more I learn about Cody, the more likelihood there is that if I want to scale and bolt on what you guys do to what we do at Prime, there's a much higher likelihood of me making that phone call to you because of the personal connection and the trust factor. If I know that you're a black belt at what you do in your space, and I'm a black belt at what I do, I'm much quicker to pull the trigger. So tactically, for people who want to produce content, I'll give you the very long road shortened, right? It now is being very clear about the Prime real estate brand and say YouTube channel is very geared around consumers. If you're looking to relocate to Southwestern Ontario, or you need to hook up with any agent on the planet, I got connections everywhere. That's who that audience speaks to. I say that in my market updates. I say it in my videos, everything. That's that audience. My personal brand is more geared around, I'm an expert in real estate and media, but I understand that if you want a coffee shop or a sneaker shop, the principles that I use to build my brokerage apply there too. And as I'm realizing that more and more, and I'm looking at what are people responding to? What are they asking me questions about? Most of the content or the social media stuff I'm putting out is a direct link to their questions. And it usually starts with a pillar piece of content. So if you're brand new at this, maybe it's writing one blog post a week because you don't want to be on camera. And then maybe you take that blog post and you break it into a Twitter thread because that's really easy to do. And then maybe you start tweeting a couple times a week. So you get comfortable interacting with people in your niche. And maybe I like real estate and media. So I hang out with a lot of YouTubers on Twitter and a lot of real estate people. As I talk to them, naturally ideas are coming out. So then I want to take my camera and say, you know what, once a week on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m., I'm going to go in the office, I'm going to shoot 5 videos, and I'm going to just post one next week. Where am I going to get my ideas from? Oh, people get paralyzed. Go back to Twitter. What are the conversations that you're having in your Twitter that's focused on your niches? And there are your ideas. Pick the best one that got the most engagement or replies and expand on that in a 60-second video and just give your personal insights as to why jiu-jitsu and real estate are the same. Guess what? In jiu-jitsu, you get really good at the basics. You do them over and over and over. Eventually, you become a black belt. Real estate's the same way. Really good at prospecting, really good at working on your business, and eventually you'll be a black belt, right? You can do it. You're stuck comparing your today to Glenda Baker's 10-year journey, right? And you want to jump there without doing the work that it takes to get there. It genuinely starts with getting an idea of who you are, how you want to project that to the world. And then from a content medium, starting somewhere that's comfortable for you, which could be pictures, video, or words, right? So I think if people could figure that out and then start with a pillar and then do everything else, I think they'd be just fine.
I love that you said, comparing your current day circumstance to Glenda's tenure, because, Glenda and I last year were at like an event together, Jason Capital. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jason. We were at a content creation event, and both Glenda and I were learning from Jason, who's like an absolute gunner when it comes to creating content. And it's like, they don't see the workshops and they don't see the money that has been spent in order to kind of get ahead. It's like, the biggest thing, like kind of bolt on what you're saying, like about like the personality behind what you're doing from a content marketing perspective. It's like there's that element of like telling your story that is just so powerful. Like you said, like now that you know these things like about me and now know these things about you, I have this deeper connection than we ever had before. And that even is a challenge, I would say to everyone on this, listening back to this podcast, is like, what are the things that you're comfortable talking about your personal story, and then salt a little bit of that in there as well, because people do want to feel connected to you. And so I said the other day in a piece of content I created, is like, social media was not created as a marketing tool. It was created as a means to actually socially network. So it's really cool to see the Twitter threads you're talking about, like the different things that you're doing in order to, build your brand, Justin, but also build Prime. Closing out here, one piece of advice that you would have for a team lead that wants to absolutely experience massive growth in 23, but also is like that person out there that is thinking to themselves, like, I'm going to be in this business for 10 years. Like, what would you say to what would you say to that team lead that has a big vision for the future, but just like is so focused on the future? And it's like, I want to get there, but I'm just not sure the right thing for this year. What should they be thinking of?
I'll say what I said at the beginning. Our founding principle of do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself. Pick up your shovel and do the work. I think the one thing that and I'm part of the problem, the one issue that I think our industry is facing is this celebritization of what it means to be a real estate agent. I do a lot of these speaking engagements when I'm in a position where I can say these things and say, hey, listen, like, this isn't selling sunset, right? Like, we need to humble ourselves. The community, the people out there in the world don't have a great perception of real estate agents because of what they've seen on Instagram over the last 5 years, what our industry did 2022 or 2020 to 2022. I think now is the best time I've ever seen for those leaders to be servant leaders and really start thinking about their communities and their team and picking up their shovels and leading by example, doing the work that nobody sees when the cameras are completely off. Then they'll get a really good idea of what their team actually needs and what they need to build for their clients. Because you and I know we live in a world where we could be chasing the next shiny object in real estate, in the next conference, the next speaker, to build what they've built. Meanwhile, we're completely disregarding that we are in the client services business, right? And from a leader perspective, that my agents are my clients as much as my clients are my clients. And if I'm not listening to them and talking to them and hearing about their dreams, ambitions, and getting into the dirt with them, willing to take out the garbage, willing to have difficult conversations, you're not going to get the love, loyalty, and respect of your clients or your agents. And ultimately, you're constantly going to be dealing with attrition and the cycle of every December, agents thinking about, well, my contract's up, I'm just going to go wherever the cheapest splits are, because there's no depth to the leadership and vision as to what they're trying to create.
Yeah, you and I, like I knew coming into this conversation today that, you know, you and I share the same type of ethos to life, to business, to contribution. So I just am so grateful that we had the opportunity to sit down today to kind of learn a little bit more about your story and just like the massive amount of value. Like I highly implore everyone listening back to this podcast to kind of rewind it. There's so many different things around clarity that is just absolutely massive. And I just want to say thank you, bottom of my heart. If somebody were to want to reach out to you, have a conversation about real estate, maybe it's an agent-to-agent referral in the London area, where's the best place that we can kind of send them for you to have a conversation with them?
I genuinely treat Instagram like a text message platform. Honestly, I message people that like I should text on IG because I'm like, well, the algorithm's going to make us see each other more and whatever, right? So I'd say Instagram, Justin.Konikow is the number one place. And I just want to say thank you, first of all, for you allowing me on the show. I appreciate what you're doing. I watch your content all the time, so people should give that a follow. But the last thing that I will say is it sounds like I have something that's absolutely perfect, and look at all the systems and everything else as well too. I'm no better than a lot of the people watching this, right? It's a constant work in progress. And I think that's the beauty of it, is the success comes from the work, not from the lagging indicators of sales or awards or speaking engagements or whatever. It's the work. So I want people to value that above anything.
Justin, thank you so much. And I want to say thank you for tuning into another episode of the RE Agent Podcast. We'll see you soon.